Shakti Mahamaya Sanatani Devi Yoganidra Devi Parashakti Devi Nirguna Maheshwari Devi Devi Brahma Mai Lilamai Devi Sarva Chaitanya Rupa Mahakali Devi Mahalakshmi Triloka Shivani Devi Mahavidya Mahamai Om Sahana Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. This is the second half of our third class on this subject of food, prana, and sadhana, one of the engaging Dharma teachings that pertinent to so many people. Like I said earlier, that food is always a consideration for people when they enter into religious life and spiritual life, as if something inside of them might be intuitive that suggests that they need to change many things about the way they're living or the way they're looking at things. And we just took up Lord Vashishta's teaching on the origin and perpetuation of disease. There's another chart that we could be showing that also comes from that same collection called The Destruction of Disease. It has many of the same teachings, but as you can see, as that chart suggested, that the acquisition of discriminative wisdom that purifies the mind is pretty much the foremost prescription that the seers will give you for getting on top of energy and act and food. If you can begin at the foremost level and then work your way down. But of course that's not the way a lot of us have come to spirituality, especially Indian spirituality, is that we've had to learn it from the outside in, and which means some consideration about food may have even been overlooked as we jumped into postures and breathing exercises, therefore taking up a lot of impurities. Whether we're eating good food or not doesn't enlighten us. As Vivekananda would say, no food or drink can taint that noble self that knows itself. Like rolling river free thou ever be. So he's suggesting that this freedom of the mind first, and then when you have that kind of clarity, that kind of higher prasad in you, then food taken in that condition will turn to nectar in your bloodstream. And you can turn any kind of food into that nectar. When the opposite is true, then you're having an agitated mind, and any kind of food you take, organic or non-organic, vegetarian or not, could turn into poison in your system. So it's again a teaching that's beyond the moral and ethics of the thing, which many people have a hard time understanding, but the few that can understand begin to work at the hub of the whole consideration, which is mind. And so if we once again show this chart, which is the original chart of this subject that we've taken up for 5 weeks, we see that this 4 pillars that we're talking about are very pronounced, but on the way to it, we've worked our way through an explanation in the first 2.5 classes about food leading to prana. If we uncover prana, then, which we will if we take good food and get some strength of body and attain some stamina and master our posture so that we're not slumping anymore, which is also a bad habit, which keeps energy from not only oxygen rising to the brain, but subtler energy rising to the mind. And also, we can purify our senses. That's something that is rather rare of attainment, even rare of practice. People just see through the eyes and hear through the ears, and they don't discriminate about what they see and what they hear, and they're taking in all sorts of unsavory things through their senses too. And they will contract diseases via that too, and a secondary cause of diseases, Yoga Vasishta, as Lord Vasishta was saying. But if they can purify the senses and equalize the breathing, then they'll naturally become aware that there's a life force in them that is more to the point. The downside of that may be that they begin to worship life force, because there's life force in everything from the drugs that an addict takes to the water and air that people breathe and swim in. So there's going to have to be a certain consideration about uncovering your prana and leading it towards a higher level. That's why this chart suggests that it be led towards awakening of psychic prana that is connected to the mind. And you can see the steps there in between prana and psychic prana. Is first you'd want to do these 3 things with prana once you become aware of it. Purify it, control it, and raise it. We've already talked a bit about impure prana when Lord Vasishta tells us about disease, and we were looking at the chart about the dispositions of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic people. That's going to predicate either a pure prana or a more impure prana or a mixed kind of prana. Now, prana itself, not being a food of a type, a physical thing, more of a subtle thing, even the prana in your food is subtle, then it's going to have to be looked at more as a vibration that becomes rough-edged or erratic. Sort of like a force that's directed somewhere, and if it's got rough edges, then it's going to carry negative effects with it. But if you can smooth it all out, make it just like a pure flow, a pure like laser beam, and let it flow, then you'll be experiencing what they call mukhya prana. Mukhya prana is, I didn't put it in here, but it's kind of what's suggested there by the idea of raised prana. You're having a healthier prana now that you're in possession of, and of course you'll know it when you feel it. You feel your senses will feel better and see better and hear better and so forth, and your breathing will be naturally balanced. And so maybe just a little exercise is all some souls will need. Little breathing exercise and little posture to bring them right back to this state of mukhya prana. And so you see a lot of healthy people with that. Now, the drawback, as I was saying, is that it can go towards undesirable attainments, like psychic powers, because it begins to turn from prana to psychic prana. Then you're going to have to guard against that tendency of the mind. In some minds, maybe other minds don't have it. Like, I never felt attracted to it, in fact, rather averse to it. But I've known other people who have more psychic temperament, you might say, who get very attracted to occult powers. And the tricks of prana is what Sri Ramakrishna used to call them. Because prana is another realm inside. You're beginning to find out the difference between the brain and the mind when you get the prana under your control, because now it's going beyond just what the brain has available to it, but it's going into the realm of higher thought. So you're going to need a carrier for that. to carry you into these higher realms. And it's going to have to be a strong carrier that's not going to give out on you halfway, leave you in the lurch. So that's why all of these exercises in the beginning were important, to gain stamina and to master the senses and everything. This is all part of the yogic fold. Last week, remember, I showed you the 8-limbed yoga in that tree and how it all proceeds. So that's a system that we hope more people will take up and therefore continue on beyond the whole idea of asana and pranayama only, and begin to get to beyond just breathing exercises. But in the meantime here, purify the prana, control the prana, and raise the prana up is very much connected with equalizing the breath, as we just saw. And equalizing the breath isn't going to be quite enough. Now you're going to want to take that energy that's balanced and you're going to raise it into the realm of the mind. Now, this is where these next 3 elements become important. Frequent holy company, select a guru, and secure a mantra. And that's going to lead us more toward the realm of psychic prana, or mind per se, that is, mind especially. Always tempted to say that if mind were pure in the first place, then all of this raising business wouldn't be necessary. That's more like an ideal that we hold. And we see it in the case of some beings who come into the body with pure minds already, very marvelous souls that accomplish all sorts of things. Even here in the weightiness of Maya and 5 elements and everything, name and form, they're still able to accomplish so much because they started out with this mind, pure mind in the first place. So we have to hold that up as the more non-dual ideal that's not only possible but most desirable in this case. But in the meantime, if we're awakening our consciousness, as they say, which is kind of a misnomer in a way because consciousness is ever awake, but we're awakening our lower consciousness, asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. If we're wanting to march from lower truth to higher truth, then these elements need to be instigated in the process. We have to consciously put them in, just like you would be filling in a puzzle or connecting the dots inside of yourself. And the greatest helpers would be holy company and a teacher, a good teacher. You can awaken your consciousness very easily with the influence of an illumined soul near you, a guru they call it in this tradition. And that's going to be the most beneficial thing for you. Holy company also could be any amount of, or any number of teachers in other traditions that you've come through, or people who were in your family or in your society who were more illumined and had a higher way of thinking and could lead you toward that. They're called upagurus. But whatever the case are, when you find the true guru, the authentic guru that's meant for you according to your temperament, your disposition, as we talked about earlier, then you're going to make swift process toward that goal. The highest goal of human existence, they call it. So this is all a kind of second half of the class preamble about these 6 things. And so let's look at this prana and its 5 forms. As Vivekananda used to say, there's really only one prana, although we're talking about it at its different levels or its different aspects, but it comes in 5 forms. Now we looked at the physical components of those 5 forms. That was in this chart over here. Remember, we had a prana that was carrying our nutrients through our bloodstream. We had a prana that was carrying our thoughts higher, and we had a prana that was excreting waste and perspiration, and a prana that was more all-pervasive, that was stayed in one place. So these are usually described the physical forms of the 5 pranas, but we're now talking about and reaching towards a psychic prana, aren't we? That's going to be a prana that's more of the mind, of the thought, of the intellect, and of intelligence itself. It's going to be leading you towards this silent deep, this silent depths within you, which is very much associated with Divine Mother and the highest attainments of spirituality, like meditation and samadhi, for instance, because if you looked at the tree of yoga, meditation and samadhi are limbs 7 and 8 of the Ashtanga system, and everything, all the 6 limbs that went before them were leading up to that. So we have to, even following a very base design like that look at the fact that meditation and samadhi are waiting, and probably not going to happen unless all the connections of these 6 limbs have been made, and some attainment has been gained along that trajectory. This is the inner path towards spiritual life, of spiritual life towards the Atman, or towards the Buddha nature, however you'd like to call it. So there you see repeated at the bottom here, inhalation, ingestion, exhalation or excretion, digestion, upward rising, and all pervasive pranas. Now you could probably pretty much see how those 5 have their physical components, but you could also see how they might suggest something on the level of inner prana or mental prana, psychic prana, as they begin to rise. And that's why this chart was designed. You can see the 5 pranas here, the one prana with its 5 forms, in other words. And you could see how, as you connect these, or as they are connected, how they come upon your increased knowledge of them as they exist in the 5 elements. Now, the 5 elements in India are called the Pancha Mahabhutas. That's an interesting word. Pancha means 5, of course, but Mahabhutas means great elements. So they're considered to be not something of a sort of lower consideration, but something very profound. That is, going in order, of course, from gross to subtle: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or coming down. The 5 akashas are 5 areas of ether, air, fire, water, and earth, if consciousness is coming out. If it's going in, then it's going to consider them earth first, water, fire, air, and ether. And in books like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you'll find out that this is how the soul gives up the body when it's dying. When it's leaving the body, that is, when the body is dying. It gives up earth first, and then it gives up water, and then it gives up fire, and it gives up air, and it gives up ether. And then it'll move from gross ether into an internal ether. And this is where your prana will kick in, because your prana is there with all those 5 elements, right? It's in earth, it's in water, it's in fire. You can feel it there, and that's actually what makes the 5 elements very appealing, is because the prana's in them. Hence what makes the body move is because the prana's in it. If the prana evacuated any of those things, poof, right? The game's over. Which is this story, for instance, one of our favorite stories about it. The rishi was asked, how many gods support creatures, and who is the greatest god? The rishi answered, the ether is that god, and air, fire, water, and earth, mind, and senses also. These, standing forth, manifested their power and declared, we are the body, we hold the body, we support it. Then Prana stepped up and said, do not be deluded, I alone, dividing myself into 5 parts, hold and support the body. But none there were disposed to believe him. That is, the earth, the god of air, fire, water, earth, and so forth, didn't believe that he was the highest god. They all thought that they were the highest god. And so he abandoned the body, and as he went out, so did all the others. Just as bees leave the hive when the queen does, so did speech, mind, eye, ear, and all others depart when Prana departed. Then they all praised him. So he proved himself to be the highest of all gods, that nothing else could exist or move or be animate or breathe or live without prana there. So it'd probably be good to acknowledge that and accept it right out the front, that, because it would help you gain reverence for life on one hand, but it would also help you escape those occult powers, because then you wouldn't be so disposed to focus on any one God. So you'd know the life force flowing through all of them. And so it served a double purpose that way. Now, in the terms of air, water, air, ether, fire, and earth, you'll see that then the Pancha Mahabhutas are the label given to them. And they're considered to be very powerful. And they also have, remember, they have their subtle components, right? Tanmatras. So you have to understand that when they call them Pancha Mahabhutas, that it's not just these gross elements they're talking about, but it's their subtle component too. And the best way to understand that is to think about when you leave these five senses. We mentioned death right now, how you would leave them, but how about dreaming tonight? You're going to shut down these five senses and you're going to take up five subtle senses in your mind, right? And five subtle elements. So you have air, earth, fire, water, and ether in a dream tonight. And you have touching, smelling, hearing, tasting, and seeing in a dream tonight. So those are subtle elements and subtle senses. So when they mention senses and elements in India, you're not just talking about, say, the way a physicist or someone else would think about them. You're thinking about, that's their gross manifestation. They also have their subtle manifestation. Same with the prana. That's their gross manifestation, excretion, breath, lifting my arm, seeing through my eye. But what's really going on here is the psychic prana, is the subtle five pranas that are connecting me inwards to these, if you want to put it this way, kingdoms of heaven within. They're connecting you in to these other realms, subtler realms, subtle body, causal body, and therefore suggesting very strongly to you that you have an inner life that persists and maintains itself even after all of this disappears for you, whether it's in dream or in death, that it's still going on. The prana still remains awake in that city, as the rishi says, Pipalada. The prana remains awake in that city like a hawk in its nest when all the senses shut down. The prana still remains awake. In fact, they even have like songs that they sing about that. They sing something like No chalo nija liketane. No chalo nija liketane. Shamshara videshe Panchaka Arbutaga Shavotor Ehanaya Para Premekeno Oye Achetano Ulicho like that, sung by Swami Vivekananda to Sri Ramakrishna, the first song he ever sang to his great master when He met him in his teenage years. So basically it says here, O mind, return to your own abode, your eternal home. You are a foreigner in this foreign land out here. Why do you roam about aimlessly with no real purpose? The 5 senses and the 5 elements, all these are different from you. None of them belong to you. Why have you become senseless in your attachment to others and forgotten your own true nature? So when they mention the 5 elements and the 5 senses, they make sure to let you know that these are insentient. And that you need to, in order to find this true nature that they're talking about, Atman, inside, then you need to return to your eternal home. And so the vehicle you return to your eternal home on isn't a car. It's like a Chevrolet or a Ford. You see, and it's more like a dream. See, it's more like an energy that fuels everything that's in you, and it's how you've worked. Consciousness worked its way out here to the realm of the 5 senses and the 5 elements, but it worked its way out through the 5 subtle senses and the 5 subtle elements, and you've forgotten that. Why have you become senseless, you see, in your attachment to everything that's external, and forgotten how you got here to the external? So, O mind, Nija Nikatane, return to your own home, return to your true abode. See? So, it's not just philosophy, that they're talking about, but it's also put in very musical and heartfelt and intuitive tones to help convince you to take this inner journey. So that's the first set of 5s you would see here. If we're coming from prana inward, then you'd probably have to call these the subtle elements, right? The tanmatras. And then after that, you're going to see here these 5, how you apprehend things with your thought. What powers the ability of apprehension. And the senses themselves. Now you're talking probably about not just your gross senses, but your subtle senses that you have in dream state tonight and that you will have after you leave the body, whether it's in dream or at the time of dropping the body. Then you'll still have these 5 senses that hopefully you've purified. And and they see clearly and they hear clearly. That is, they see the light, they hear the sound of Om. They they smell the fragrance of God. They taste the food of Jnanam, of wisdom. You see, these are senses that are on a whole different level than these senses here. You see, they're eating too through the prana and the food. But when you talk about your subtle senses, they have a much deeper function in your consciousness. So the prana is connecting, right? Animation is there. Now, animation out here is just a matter of moving your body from one place to the other. Hopefully you're not going to bump into anything. Have any problems. But animation inside is, of course, a much subtler nature, subtler level. You're going to animate yourself from one dream to the next, for instance, or from one world to the next. If you think that your dreams are just imaginations, and sometimes they fall into that level of things, but you don't know that your dreams can be very visionary too. They can be very revealing. They can have very powerful messages for you and very strong indicators of what you're supposed to do, either outwardly or internally, depending on which direction you're moving. See? If you're coming out to the body or if you're going into the soul, then these are going to be very key tools for you, and the prana has to be fit in them. It has to be able to operate in the subtle realm. So animation itself is to be meditated upon. How do I move inside, not just how do I move outside, you see. It's a very subtle thing, but it's very profound, isn't it? To sit and think about moving inside of yourself and opening up channels for you to do that. And keep the same ideology when you fall asleep. Maybe you'll have a dream where you're in two places at once. See, you're in a higher realm and you're thinking, this is beautiful. There's Sri Ramakrishna. So my ideal is here. There's Mother Kali. Everyone's here. But I'm also back in my body on earth. And then poof, you wake up. You see. So you're in two places at once. You see, the prana is so facile, that's so swift that it can accommodate that consciously. You see, it has to accommodate higher things. It has to accommodate food, mantra, and sadhana. It has to facilitate thought, mind, and will. This is actually pretty much where the pyramid is heading, where the 5 pranas are taking you towards psychic prana. And so animation and transmigration then, how is it that I move from one place to another? There's a power of animation, but there's also the places themselves, how I'm transmigrating from one level to another, and what are these realms that I'm encountering? See, the prana is keeping them supported too, right? Prana is holding them as well. There's a kind of life breath that's going on even in the realm of the gods who don't have physical lungs, but there's still a breath going on there. See, there's a inward held and outward breath going on there of the mind. You see, the mind breathes too. The whole cosmos breathes inside. We know it breathes outside. It expands the world and it contracts in the sunlight and in nighttime. So just like that, you have to imagine there's also that kind of a transformation going on subtly in the great mind, a contraction, and then a stasis, and then an expansion, stasis, and then a contraction. See, just like giving birth. So all of these things are present due to the prana on all of those levels, and you must become aware of them. In fact, I'd say here, there's no way to do a sadhana anymore. There's no outer sadhana involved in this anymore. You just have to will it. See, the very act of you becoming aware of the thing makes it true. And if you're not aware of it, it isn't. See? So you have to open up to that. There has to be nadis or nerves, subtle nerves that open up to these things in order for you to behold them. It's that spontaneous and it's that mercurial, it's that lightning swift. And those are these inner realms inside that are breathing too, that are existing on a psychic prana level. And you could say very beautiful, very wonderful, but you could see where it could also be very precarious. Mm-hmm. These upper chakras, very precarious to hold a balance there. So if you haven't gained sattva while you were living in a body, you're always rajasic or you're always tamasic, then do you see how you're going to be born in rajasic and tamasic wombs thinking the world is the only place there is. You just came out of another world, but you don't know about it. Mm-hmm. You're all of a sudden just born in the physical world and you've forgotten everything that happened in the bardo between the time you died last lifetime and where you were born this lifetime. See, it just doesn't figure, does it? It's not good. Where did my consciousness go? What is awareness? And so, anyway, to say animation and transmigration are things that are very important just to sit and think about, just to shut your eyes and contemplate on their very existence. The fact that they have words that denote them is penultimate to, almost equal to awareness itself of their existence, that they exist. Now, purification, that really does get more towards sadhana on an inner level, and as I was just saying, this kind of sadhana is going to be totally of the mind. And in fact, you see in advanced practitioners, their sadhana is pretty much just to sit still and meditate. That's where their sadhana has led them now. And that's about it. The breathing's been controlled, the body's posture's has been mastered, and now they're just saying, I'm going to sit, and pretty soon they're meditating with eyes open and eyes closed. Well, I'm going to come out of my formless eyes closed meditation, and I'm going to just, without any deviation or any break, just go into my eyes open meditation. And know inside that I'm not going anywhere. See, that I'm staying in one place all the time, even when I'm cooking my dinner or when I'm sleeping or when I'm moving from place to place. You see, the soul is stationary, and it's all pervasive. So it's stationary means it's in one place all the time, but it's everywhere. That one place is everywhere at one time. So it's stationary and all pervasive, right? So it can be there and it can also be here. That's the beauty of it. So you're not really moving away from yourself to get to some other self, are you? You're already over there and you're here. You're stationary and you're all pervasive. So it's not really a kind of animation that involves actual movement. The soul is stationary. Brahman's all pervasive. These are the non-dual truths you hear, but now you're at this level of purification, of higher mind. You're comprehending these things, you're apprehending them, and you're driving them deep into the very memories, your subtle memory, right down to the roots of who you are, and how you incepted all of this in the first place, how you decided to fashion subtle senses, subtle elements, gross senses, and move out into the external world, all without ever moving at all, see. So this is enlightenment, see. Knowing that Brahman is everywhere. What is enlightenment? They ask Shankara. He says it's Brahmadvitya. It's that Brahman is one without a second, and it's in everything. Jagad Mithya, you see. It's not the world, but it's in the world. Brahman Satya, it's the non-dual essence of Brahman, which is in everything, but which is not a thing. So you're having these great sayings which you've always maybe appreciated and wondered at come true inside of your own thinking process, see, at that level. And the prana is there supporting all this, and it's all of a sudden looking at you and saying, hi, I was prana there, but now I'm psychic prana. See? Don't be deceived or surprised. I've now turned into something very subtle that's consummate with the level that you're on, which the level your consciousness is graduated to. It shifts with you. In fact, it helps you shift. So, of course, difficult to explain. As far as words can say, the seers have done so, but one can experience this and should experience this for themselves. Now, the next level of fives there, of course, is just the four Vedas and the ashrama. Basically, the scriptures and sacrifice and ashrama are all there at the level of highest wisdom. Those come first. Out of them proceeds the rain and the food, as the Gita says and the Upanishads say. So it has to be this, these great sayings, these mahavakyas and these great scriptures that support them. And most likely what the soul is going to realize at this level is that these Vedas are eternal, and that everything has proceeded out of them. See, the worlds and rain and food and everything has just come like in a circle, right out of the Vedas and back into them. And now all you need to do is to live them, live the truths in them, live the ashrama. See, you need to. Your life has to be in an ashrama. It has to be in sacrifice, yagya, It has to be in an ashrama, unless you're a sannyasin, and you're going to transcend all of those. But in the meantime, you have that very strong basis for you. And the prana now has become Shakti. It's become the wisdom that has caused or has allowed the thoughts of the rishis to formulate these Vedas. See, it's all back in the great mind, right? So that they've thought and contemplated the great mind, and they've pulled out these jewels from the scriptures and put them together in certain ways of saying. One's the 8 limbs of yoga, and the other's the Eightfold Noble Truth, and so forth. Throughout time, they've congealed these systems of teaching out of these wonderful facets of Dharma, in the 4 Vedas and so forth, and the 108 Upanishads. So we got into that a little bit last week when I showed you that chart on the scriptures coming to earth, Mother India's scriptures coming to earth in sets of 5s, the trickle-down process, if you remember. So anywhere beyond that then is this culmination. On one end it'll culminate in thought, mind, and will, that whole practice. And then finally intelligence, which is up here. But food, mantra, and sadhana is another way of saying that. So it's almost like our subject today, food, prana, and sadhana. So we make this connection with the prana to allow you to gain some encouragement to go ahead and purify it, control it, and raise it, and see what it's going to culminate in for you and your spiritual journey inside. It's something you need to be doing in an inward direction. We used to call it inward ascension. It's like going up, but it's also going in. And so just as if prana has made an outward movement out to the 5 elements, it can also turn and retrace its steps and make an inward movement to its source, which is what we just sang in the song. Return to your own abode, your eternal home. Now, you can see where it all leads up here to, you could say in any one of these 3 ways. Leads to Atman, if you want to speak of it Vedantically. It leads to Ojas and Tejas, if you want to speak about it in terms of yoga and so forth. Ojas and Tejas, of course, means stored up energy, as we were talking about in the first half of the class. And then when you have that energy stored up and refined, then you can transmit it. You can use it for transmitting the Dharma and the wisdom to other souls who may be suffering or struggling or striving. And therefore helping awaken consciousness to its unlimited nature. On the other end, of course, Kundalini Shakti, which is a little bit more pertinent to what we're heading for here as we turn the corner next week towards these higher practices that we were just saying, meditation and the attainments of samadhi, seated samadhis and unseated samadhi. We'll get to those with some specific charts. So, therefore, we've pretty much finished this chart, but there's that quote from Pipalada in the Prashna Upanishad that says, "Of the Atman is born the prana, like a shadow it is spread out on that. It comes into the body by an act of the mind," like will. So you can see how we've been talking from the ground up, right? To realize our true nature, or to involute. But here is putting it in terms of how it actually is. Of the Atman is born this prana. So it spreads out like a shadow of a man. So it's put in like a shadow, it's spread out on that. So this prana then, all the way up to the Atman, very, very different forms. First grows in food, then prana as far as energy, then prana as far as thoughts and intelligence and mind, then prana turns into Shakti, and finally Shakti is that Atman. You see, it points you directly to this highest rendering. And you'll shifting in grades like that as your consciousness shifts the four states: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and turiya. You see, four levels. Now, we haven't read it yet, so let's read it. Just what Vivekananda said about prana, which is really precious. All the forces that are in the universe revolve back into the prana. In the next cycle, out of this prana evolves everything that we call energy, everything that we call force. It is the prana that is manifesting as motion. It is the prana that is manifesting as gravitation, as magnetism. It is the prana that is manifesting as the actions of the body, as the nerve currents, as the thought force. From thought down to the lowest force, everything is but a manifestation of prana. Couldn't have put it better. Anyone couldn't have put it better, you see. And in an age like this, where the prana is obscured to everyone, taking in everything that's being talked about: gravitation, motion, body, thought, see. Whether you're a physicist, or whether you're a metaphysicist, or whether you're an intellectual or a psychologist, there it all is, you see. But you haven't put your finger on it yet. What's animating the whole thing? What's connecting the whole thing? And therefore, what's going to make sense out of the whole thing once you do account for it? And, for the physicist, and for the metaphysicist, and for the psychologist, it's going to be different, isn't it? If the psychologist comes upon it, then they can begin to explain dream and deep sleep. Not only explain it, connect it. Not only connect it, know that there are states of consciousness called the kingdoms of heaven within you. And that's what Christ was talking about 2,000 years ago. My Father's mansion has many chambers. See, these are worlds inside of you, and the prana connects you to them all. You're also well aware of them in an unconscious way. You're very aware of them in an unconscious way. It's almost natural as breath to go into deep sleep and dream and to come out, as if there is no death, as if there is no shifting of consciousness, as if the worlds are all unreal and only the Atma is real. It's all very perfectly natural to you as a soul. But if you could connect the prana to the thought, and the thought to the Shakti and so forth, then wouldn't you be much richer in awareness? So wouldn't you know how everything moves, how everything comes and goes? Wouldn't you dissolve all the doubt in you and be in full awareness of your true nature, as the song was just telling us? Why have you become attached and deluded outside and forgotten your true nature? That's where the bliss is, that's where the wisdom is, that's where all the essence is. The essence of your experiences lies there. So, beautiful quote by Vivekananda. Now, in the remaining time, let's look at one more set of prana chart, because if we do, we pretty much can arrive next week at close to the psychic prana and take up teachings that are associated with that. So this is a chart on prana that helps us understand the connections as well. In a more hands-on way, you might say. Pretty much what I did is I took a spring and just uncoiled it. That's pretty much like they ask you to do if you're a student of Kundalini Yoga. The teacher will ask you, have you uncoiled your spring yet? Or if you unfurled your coil, you see. So this is 7-centered coil. It's in the spine here. Has it awakened yet? Has it expanded? Has it come to know itself? Has your consciousness visited these upper realms? Or is it still gravitating down here at eating, drinking, and sex life only? It knows nothing about anything higher. So I took that and put it up there over a beautiful image of Divine Mother, and therefore next to it further put a gauge, actually two gauges, one that measures in terms of levels and one that measures in terms of degree. And then marched right up using each of one of those coils as a level of prana. That is, first it starts off as food, right? Now, not content to do that, I looked in all the scriptures, Upanishads mainly, and I found quotes that were pertinent to each of these levels so that you could understand, not just by seeing that prana goes from raw to refined to subtle to pure to transcendent, which is one way of understanding it. Oh, good, I know that. See, I know that the prana has different levels. Or that it starts out primal, turns vital, turns ethereal, turns celestial, then goes divine on you, then universal, then superconscious. So you could look at it that way too, you see, in levels of consciousness. So whether you look at it levels of consciousness or levels of degree, pure to impure, pure to mixed, pure, impure to impure, as they say in the Vedanta or in the Tantra, Shuddha, 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 and Vishuddha. Ashuddha, Shuddha, Shuddha, and Shuddha or Vishuddha means from impure to mixed, pure, impure to pure, to transcendent. So you can understand it that way, and then you could have some sort of an idea of how prana acts inside of you. Not just the body mechanism, but the body-mind mechanism. Not just the body-mind mechanism, but the body-mind-psyche mechanism. From food to prana to psychic prana, you see, and then hopefully you'll meet her face to face and the whole thing will be over, game over, right? Game over. You see Mother and that's it, right? Mm-hmm. Don't have to worry about any of this ever again. You just go to Manidvipa and merge. Manidvipa is the jewel island of essence, which is your highest and best consciousness. So, having explained this, then, this is pretty much what fills in the gaps for us. That is, our intellectual understanding, our psychological understanding, our philosophical understanding needs some filling in, needs some pegs to stand on. So, if you started out with food, then, they say in the Upanishads, when prana pours down as rain, all creatures are delighted, knowing there will be food. So they're not making any distinction there between the elements and prana, are they? At the gross level, rain moves and falls and flows into rivers and streams purely because it's prana. Otherwise, nothing would be happening, as our story told us, you see. If prana goes, then nothing would move. It's the animating power in everything. And if Swami Vivekananda just told us that gravity was prana, then we know why rain falls, you see. Right? Why is rain falling? See, because of gravity. Why is gravity there? Because of prana. See? So you're going to be able to connect everything back to a subtle source, an origin. Without an origin, then nothing makes any sense. And the second level, which is still raw and primal, you see, still very raw and primal, the five elements appear. He burns as fire, he is the sun, he is the cloud and the wind, earth and all matter. He is what is and what is not, and also what is immortal. A nice quote, I think that's from the Svetasvatara Upanishad, talking about prana, the god prana. So in the five elements there you see, not just at the level of rain falling where there's going to be food for all of us, yea, yea, verily, yea. But also at the level of the five elements as cosmic principles, there's prana. See. Next level is at the level of body and senses, because that comes next in the scheme of things, right? We go from food to the five senses, now to the five elements, now to the actual physical body and the senses that are connected there, physical senses. To thee, O prana, who dwellest in the body with the senses, all creatures carry their offerings. So remember how there's a prana that carries everything, nutrients to the organs, the bloodstream carries the blood, and so we're talking about this prana that's carrying everything to everywhere, all your organs, your senses. It begins to explain to you how your eyes see, your ears hear, your nose smells, and your tongue tastes, and your hands feel because of the prana. Take the prana out, poof, none of that happens, right? So that's the instrumentality of prana in the body and the senses. These are ways of helping you account for this, right? Rather than just take it for granted, but actually to account for it so that you know that there's another force than just magnetism or gravity or kinetic energy or something, you see, that's being studied about all agog by physicists. But there's another force that's even more amazing than whatever quantum physics could teach you about atomic particles. It's a living force. It's life force. It's the only good word in English we have for prana is life force. The French call it élan vital. See, so people are aware of it. And like I said, it's in filling everything. It's not just the taste in your oatmeal that you like in the morning, but it's whatever you like, whatever passion you have, that's because of prana. So you like to surf, then the prana's in the water making the waves tube for you, you see. If you're an addict, then prana's in the cocaine, making you addicted, see. It's not the substance itself it's the real essence of the thing, it's the prana in it. And that's why sometimes people are going to mistake that for life itself. In other words, it'll preempt eternal life. It'll masquerade as eternal life, and people won't go any further than the prana and the tricks of prana. Very big problem there. Which is why if you didn't purify yourself with pure food and pure thought and pure energy back then in your early sadhana period, that you might run afoul of attraction to the psychic prana, to the tricks of prana. See, no good for you. See? Those are like crow droppings by the side of the road. No sane person would want them, Sri Ramakrishna said. Or Sri Krishna said in the Gita, if you have attraction to even one of the eight occult powers, Arjuna, then you'll never reach spiritual enlightenment. So the great souls know about that danger. From body and senses, let's go up a notch to what is ethereal and part of the vital realm. Rebirth and ancestors. Could hardly say one word without the other, because you have to be reborn somewhere and to someone. So there's this connection with your ancestors, with your family line, and it's not just genealogy and heritage and genes and so forth, but it has to be a connection back into consciousness that is with the realm of your ancestors. Call it the lower heavens, if you want. Sometimes they'll just, generalize it. Heaven. See? Heaven is a loaded word. If you capitalize it and say that's the highest state. But if you just say, I'm going to heaven, that's not a very high state. But if you say lower heaven, you're in trouble, see, with your ancestors. They have a design on you, you have an attachment to them, and you're going to be born in the womb again and again. And it's going to depend on tamas and rajas and sattva as to whether you're going to either be stuck there or get out, isn't it? Mm. Born with rajasic wombs, as Krishna said, or born tamasic wombs, or are you going to be born with light, luminosity, and be able to work your way out of this maze called Maya in this lifetime? Using what? The prana. Awaken your consciousness and ride it on and place it on the Garuda bird of prana and move inward, move to your source, return to your eternal home. Otherwise, they wouldn't be singing about the beauty of Shakti if that wasn't the case. Jaya Jaya Jagadavandini, Jaya Jaya Jagadavandini, Devi Dukha Harini Tarini, Devi Dukha Harini Tarini, Mahesha Hridaya Vashini, Jaya Jaya Jagadavandini, Mahesha Hridaya Vashini, Jaya Jaya Jagadavandini, Jaya Jaya Jagadavandini. Devi Dukkha Harini Tarini, you are the one that removes our sorrows and troubles and safely guides us across the fearful expanse of universal suffering. Devi, the goddess, see. And we are saying, connecting up the food, which comes from her, to the prana that's in the food, to the psychic prana, by which she awakens the mind, that brings the mind to her, and offers itself to Kali, to the Divine Mother of the Universe. So, how is that going to happen if your ancestors are standing in your way? Or maybe a better question, how do I convince my ancestors to come with me to the realm of Kali and give up this attachment to the 5 elements on earth and the body and birth and happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday over and over again? Because it's never a happy birthday. It's a happy death day. When your ignorance dies and you're free of bodies, that's happy. That's true happiness. When you can be free of form, when you can move inside of yourself through dreaming and deep sleep all the way to Brahman and back, without the slightest obstacle in your way, then you're happy. With a capital H. So capitalize heaven and capitalize happiness. You'll be fine, you see, if you master the prana and use it. And therefore you would have a refined level, wouldn't you? You'd go beyond vital and ethereal, and you'd reach a celestial or refined level, and there you'd find out that above the ancestors are the gods, that the ancestors are actually aspiring towards the gods. They might have to do it through many births, but every once in a while an ancestor will actually become a god. But it'll probably still come back to earth as somebody's ancestor. So if you reach the realm of the devas, the shining ones, that's been called sattvic already, hasn't it? Luminosity is their trait. So there, the quote is, O Prana, thou art the best carrier for the gods, and the first offering to the ancestors. Thou art Indra and Rudra, thou art the Lord of lights. Indra is the god of gods, Rudra is the all-destroying Shiva. So if you reach that level, then you've reached a very high station of consciousness, which is called celestial or refined. And prana there is the best carrier of the offerings. Between the gods and the mains, they say, or between the gods and the ancestors, it's the best carrier of all offerings that the ancestors will make to the gods, if they're aware of them, and that the gods will send back to them, just like sends rain here and gives us food, right? The sacrifices we do and the studies we make of the Vedas produce the rain, and the rain produces the food. So, as in heaven, so on earth, he said, right? That's a very loaded statement. Turn it around on itself too, as in earth, so in heaven. So there you find these cosmic laws operating. Now, we have just enough time to reach the top of the coil, to unfurl our coil completely. And there you see, it's at a divine level. If you go beyond the gods and the ancestors, you've reached something very subtle, the subtle realm, you might say. And the mind and the psyche await there, and that's very much in accord with the psychic prana, how prana is going to refine itself. probably the most powerful effect of that is called intelligence. Remember, we want to use our discriminative intelligence in order to escape diseases of the mind, right? And if we did that in a previous lifetime, then we're born in a more healthy state this time. And we can transcend disease, or what diseases we do get, we can annihilate them and just live eternally. Even when our body drops, we go on living in our subtle senses and our subtle realms and so forth. So in that regard, then, the mind and psyche is playing a very crucial part. The quote here for that is, "In the heart there are 101 nerves, and in each of them there are another 100. And in each of these branch into 72,000 more." 101 times 100 times 72,000. Who's the mathematician here that can give me that number? It is all these.
7 billion.
In all these moves the all-pervasive prana. So that's how all-pervasive prana is. No matter what nerve or what nadi or what level, there it is. In food, in thought, in action, in thought, and in the psyche, into the highest realms. There is the prana carrying everything. And now beginning to show itself up as something of a cosmic intellect level. See, now that's where it gets subtle and universal, is where you find this next coil. The quote there, "The wise one attains immortality having known the origin of prana, its advent, its all-pervasiveness, its fivefold distribution, and its internal aspects." Its internal aspects are what I'm explaining to you right now in these charts, in this set of classes. These are the internal aspects. The external aspects we took last week, first week, in food, right? In animating force and so breath and so forth. But these are the internal aspects of prana that are very, very seldom known about. So the wise one attains immortality by knowing those things. Again, just by thinking on it, hearing it from some great rishi or from some great scripture, and your mind is pure, and your food is pure, and your energy is pure, and your acts are pure, then what is that turns into nectar in your bloodstream when you eat? See? That's wisdom, that's intelligence, that's the highest of all. It allows you to live a divine life, free of faults, free of doubts, free of limitations, and free of any impediments to your highest realization. Enlightenment, kaivalya, mukti, moksha. You can become a jivan mukta. So that's at the cosmic level there. Meanwhile, the helix of Maya is spinning, you see, all the time, off to the side, as you transcend her. Now finally, beyond the universal, what could there be? The most pure, the superconscious, and that's Shakti and Om. Of course, this chart is taking us a little bit prematurely toward what we are going to next week and the week after, but nevertheless, it's good to have those hints or those suggestions. So the quote there is a very beautiful one. When the three matras of Om are left unconnected, there is mortality. A matra is like a syllable. It's like a letter. So you have A, U, and M. That's what they mean by the three matras of Om. So if those are left unconnected, there is mortality. But when they are connected in the prana, they are rightfully employed. What is peaceful, undecaying, immortal, free from fear, the seer attains by the means of Om. So you see that prana then will find its way right up to Shakti and right into the word. And you might say, give itself away there and just become the Atman. See, because why? Because out of the Atman it has come, spread out like the shadow of a man, isn't it? You have to look at it both ways. See, you have to look at this descending and its ascending to understand it fully. Out of the Atman came the prana, spread out like the shadow of a man. There, you see. So if you're going that way, if If you're ascending consciousness, then you find yourself right to the Word, and then you see that Shakti and divine power all dissolves into the Word, because the Word was with God, the Word was God, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So, therefore, you're having some very powerful coalescence going on, and some very high non-dual understanding is dawning on the mind. At that time, it's superconscious. Superconscious. Now, only thing that's beyond that would be, what is transcendence? And that's, of course, Kundalini herself. That's one of her most precious names, Divine Mother of the Universe, Kundalini Shakti. You talk about Kali and Durga and Tara and Uma and Parvati and so forth. All those beautiful names of the Mahashakti. Kundalini Yoga, Kundalini Shakti has to take its place amongst those, the most beautiful of them all. And she's somehow everywhere, but she's also dynamic. She's stationary but dynamic. She performs the impossible through Kundalini Shakti. Now, the only other quote there we've already seen. Although it's extended, let's read it anyway to put a capper on this chart. Of the Atman is born the Prana. Like a shadow of a man, it is spread out on that. It comes into the body by the will of the mind. The one who knows the imperishable Atman, in which rests the mind, prana, and senses, verily becomes omniscient and enters into all. So this is where, of course, it gets good, as they say. Mm-hmm. Now to end, because we're coming up a few more minutes left in this class, let's read the final chant. Controlling the heaven-aspiring senses and the life force with the help of the mind and intellect, the immanent soul so regenerates them as to enable them to manifest the infinite self-luminous light of awareness. All that exists in the three worlds is under the control of Prana, and Prana is Mother. May she transmit wisdom to us via her divine energy. So, you might say, to conclude, the very highest work or boon of Prana is to transmit wisdom to you, is to bring about the dawning of wisdom in your mind. It's just like to confer upon you the richness of the Dharma, which is what we've been trying to do here in our own way at SRV associations in this particular set of classes. And in all the classes we do, the Dharma is very essential. So, beautiful quote there from the Svetashvatara Upanishad, one of the more recent of the ancient Upanishads. Svetashvatara was a great seer and a great head of his line of rishis. A whole line of illumined souls came out of him. So that's a great grandsire you're talking about there. Like a mind-born son or a being of a solar dynasty, a very light-filled being. And puts it in a very beautiful way there. If you can control the heaven-aspiring senses and the life force with the help of the mind and intellect, then you can regenerate them so that they come to know the infinite light of awareness. It's very profound because most people, the senses are heaven-aspiring. Heaven means more pleasure to most people. Less pain, more pleasure. I'll have, pleasurable experiences in heaven without all the problems, the karma that attends on pleasure down here. So, heaven-aspiring senses, the Upanishadic rishis were not into attaining that. They wanted to get a hold of that with the life force and regenerate the senses so that they would come to realize the infinite self-luminous light of the Atman. See, how about that for a powerful culture and set of beings who lived thousands of years prior to the Christian era? Something to be considered. And at the same time, then, they say, salutations to the prana. It's all pervasive. It is Mother. And may it confer upon us, under our control, all the wisdom of the Dharma that is possible for the human mind to comprehend. So there we bring a nice end and a timely end to this first two corners, you might say. We'll look a little bit at the great aids there, holy company, guru, and sadhana and mantra, or what does it say? Secure mantra. We'll take a look at all of those to begin our class next week, and it has a new chart on Holy Mother that I've prepared that I will show right out the front for us, these two side by side, and then we will work our way into these higher echelons of our own awareness that we need to understand and comprehend. That is the plan for enlightenment of the entire being on all levels, all its passionate intensity, and to the most subtle and refined degrees. So here we will end with a chant. Om Bhadram Karnibhihi Srinayama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabirya Jatraha Stirai Rangayishtushtuvam Sastanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayohu Svastina Indra Vrida Shravaha Svastina Pusha Vishwadevaha Svastina Starksho Arishtanemihi Svastino Brihaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual, and hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshiping the Lord and Mother of the universe with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Vidya Avidya Devi Maheshani Shri Yoga Mai Chakti Devi Jaya Vijaya Devi Vasundari Shri Mantra Shakti Mata Deva Devi Dasa Tattva Devi Shakti Darshini Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam